Game one of the Western Conference semifinals is in the book, and while there are plenty of positives to build off of, there also are certainly some adjustments that need to be made before game two. Damichael Cole, Shawn Coleman here with you to talk about some great performances from Ja and Jaren, but some other areas where the Grizzlies certainly need to improve before Tuesday night. That much more here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.
Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you're having an outstanding start to your day. And with me, as always, from the Commercial Appeal, known as Damichael C, but someone that had plenty to see courtside for game one, Damichael Cole. Damichael, how are you this evening, sir?
Shawn, I'm doing pretty good. My nose is actually a little stopped up. You probably can hear it. I almost sound like I'm playing a French horn or something. But we're good. We're good. It's going to be a fun series. It was a fun game one, up and down, back and forth. Just sets up for a classic battle.
Yeah. Now, I don't know about Damichael and myself. I think, with all honesty, sinuses, allergies may be why we may have the urge to sneeze during this episode. But it was Brandon Clark who surprisingly didn't have to sneeze after a little bit of a love tap from Draymond Green in the first half of tonight's game. Of course, before we get too far into it, you can find myself at Stats SAC, Damichael at Damichael C, the show at Locked On Grizz. Both of us are credentialed media members with the Grizzlies, your coach here at Locked On Grizzlies, your Grizzlies every day. But let's start there, Damichael. Obviously, the first half was back and forth. The Grizzlies did get off to their strong start, but here comes back the Warriors, and then all of a sudden, Draymond Green makes a hard foul. Let's be honest, it's something that he's done in the past. But this time around, there was a little bit extra to it, and it wound up being a flagrant 2 and an ejection. Just your thoughts from courtside.
Yeah, it was wild just to see it all unfold. The crowd was chanting, throw him out. And Draymond Green said on his podcast that he didn't even think it deserved to be a flagrant 1, let alone a flagrant 2. So he kind of was getting ready to dance and celebrate and taunt the crowd. But it turned into him, running off the court, trying to pump the crowd up, get his teammates going. But overall, just that sequence, I definitely thought he deserved a flagrant 1. I talked to the lead crew chief after the game, Kane Fitzgerald, and Kane basically said that, there was excessive contact. And I thought, it was interesting when I asked him what made this a flagrant 2 instead of a flagrant 1. He pointed out 2 things. He pointed out 1, the slap on the head across the face. And then 2, he said the pull down of the jersey. Now, I've seen, Warriors fans have been all in my mentions, just basically saying that, he tried to, help him up, keep him up. Anyone who's played basketball on any type of level where the game is officiated, if you commit a hard foul, and you want to stay in the game, you got to try to play it off. If you're yanking a guy down by the jersey, let me grab him while he's on his way down. Maybe they'll think, and I'm not saying Draymond did that, but I think too many people assumed that, he was just helping him up. That's not a flagrant 2. He was being nice to him. That's how you play it off. That's like the equivalent of a flop, But at the end of the day, I did see that it deserved to be a flagrant 1. I have a hard time just understanding the flagrant 2 rule, but it was surprising to see. I will say this: Golden State played the way they did after that. And another thing was surprising is, Shawn, Brandon Clark doesn't, get agitated too often, but he had some interesting things to say after the game.
Absolutely did. The main thing that Brandon Clark pointed out was that it didn't surprise him that Draymond Green did that Draymond Green has had a history of doing it. And listen, I know that that's probably going to be taken, as, a bit of a rivalry, a bit of a, poke at Draymond, what may have you, and that's perfectly fine in these playoff series. But it's not that Brandon Clark is wrong. Part of the story, part of the narrative, the overall of what makes Draymond is the hard fouls, is the extra stuff. But the thing about it is that so when he goes out, it felt like that could be a turning point of the game. It felt like that the Grizzlies were going to be able to put together enough offense to figure out a way to win this game up 6 at halftime. But then what we saw, Damichael, was actually an open door that threw difference maker for the Warriors in this game, stepped through and shut emphatically behind him, and that is Jordan Poole. I was about to say Trae Young. Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, 15 of 39 from the field in last night's game. The Grizzlies did their job at stopping Steph and Klay. The problem is Jordan Poole, 55% from the field, 50% from three, 31 points overall. This has got to be his best game of the series if the Grizzlies are truly going to have a chance.
Shawn, just talking leading up to this series, that was my whole thing. The Grizzlies, we're talking the Splash Brothers and the typical Warriors that we've seen, in the last couple years, but Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, they can beat those teams right now. The difference maker is and will be Jordan Poole and how he plays. And like you said, he can't have a night like that because at the end of the day, you contained Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. 8 of 20 for Steph Curry, 6 of 19 for Klay Thompson. You contained those two probably as good, or you would hope on par for the rest of this series. So you can't bank on holding Klay Thompson for 6 and 19. He's a professional scorer. But one thing you can limit is Jordan Poole going 12 of 20, 5 of 10, coming off the bench. He did that coming off the bench. They started Gary Payton in his place, basically to play defense against Ja Morant. And, I don't know how, the Grizzlies took that, but now they know. I mean, Jordan Poole is lethal. He's a legit scorer. He changed that game. And Shawn, I think more than anything, the most impressive part about that third quarter, me and you have talked about it over and over and over. And I know a lot of the viewers have thought this as well. Jaren Jackson was hot. He was hot as a firecracker in that third quarter, but it just didn't matter. The Grizzlies were still outscored by 7 points with Jaren Jackson Jr. putting up 14 points in the third quarter because Jordan Poole.
Absolutely. And that is what stands out in this game. We've talked about the Grizzlies playing a full 48. We've talked about the Grizzlies getting off to a good start and doing it. The Grizzlies played a very good offense in this game. They absolutely did. They probably did not pass the ball as much as you would like. They probably turned the ball a bit over, and we'll get into another big factor that's got to change moving forward in the second segment. But one thing that I'll say about this game is this that stands out to me. Yes, the Grizzlies lost, but there are plenty of positives to take away from this. Ja and Jaren, the only pair of Grizzlies teammates in franchise history to both score 30 points in a playoff game. Never been done before by a Grizzlies pair of teammates. It's been done now. 6 of 7, or 67 points for them. You had De'Anthony Melton come off the bench and be absolutely spectacular, something that myself and many others felt was going to be a factor in this series. And then you had the Grizzlies 16 of 40 from three, 40%. All those factors should point to a Grizzlies victory. They are positives to build from, but Damichael, I'll get your perspective on it. I'm not saying the series can't be won now, but this does feel like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, Shawn. I mean, these are things that we always talk about lead to a Grizzlies win, right? I mean, we harp on the numbers. We harp on just the opportunity. When Jaren Jackson Jr. plays well, often leads to a win. When Jaren Jackson Jr. makes three-pointers, often leads to a win. When Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. play well, often leads to a win. The three-point shooting for the Grizzlies, 16 made threes. They don't do that a lot, but when they do, they often win games. All of the things that we talk about make this team, elite. In a way, not all of them, but some of them happen. But the Warriors the Warriors had answers. The Grizzlies made 16 threes. They made 14. The Grizzlies, had 26 assists. Warriors had 31. The most surprising, and we'll get to it, but, Steven Adams, I think, will be starting in this series eventually because, quite frankly, Xavier Tillman, it was a great experiment in the first round. It's not going to work this series. This isn't the series for it. He was -10 in just 13 minutes of play. It was a great curveball for the first round, not for this round. Overall, rebounding numbers were pretty even. The rebounding numbers won't be even when Steven Adams gets out of health and safety protocols. So there are some things you take from this game. And yeah, it definitely was a missed opportunity. But the Grizzlies, they have a difference maker in protocols who we don't know when he'll get back. But, that could be a big boost because right now I think they're a couple pieces short.
Absolutely. And the other factor that came into this is that a couple of reliable scoring options for the Grizzlies certainly did struggle as well for much of the game. We'll discuss that in just a moment. One thing I can tell you is that, if you want to score big when it comes to wagering and betting on sports, and by scoring big, I mean winning yourself some money. That's the point of betting, is go to betonline.net, whether it's on your mobile device or your laptop. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way for you to bet on all your sports action. It could be playoff basketball, it could be the NFL draft, it could be Major League Baseball, what have you. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way for you to bet and wager on sports. And I keep saying that because you want it to be easy, right? You want for the way for you to be able to bet on sports to be something that's easy, taken care of, and you can move on. That's BetOnline.net. Check it out and make it your number one place for betting and wagering on sports today. Obviously, the NFL draft has occurred, and I know that Damichael Cole cannot be more than happy with the fact that, hey, Alontae Taylor went in the second round. Matthew Butler went during the draft. Velus Jones went during the draft. Thing that we're getting at is that whether you're a college football fan who's glad to see your favorite players get drafted, or you're an NFL fan who saw your team have a great draft, check out the Locked On College and Locked On NFL podcast of your choice as your second and third listen of the day after Locked On Grizzlies for all the fallout from the 2022 NFL draft. So let's get into some of these things that you mentioned, Damichael, because again, like I say, offensively, the Grizzlies played very good for much of the game. But that was Jaren Jackson, and it was Ja Morant. The other thing, though, that stood out was that I thought that the Warriors did a very good job of defending Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane, because the Warriors knew that stopping those two may give them a better chance of not having the Grizzlies find their three-point shots. Of course, Ja and Jaren combining for 10 threes on their own is not something you usually expect. But my point is that more than likely, you're not going to see Ja and Jaren scored 67 combined points again. You make up for that, though, by smarter shot selections from Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane, and even more importantly, especially for Dillon Brooks, if it's not there, instilling in him to do what needs to be done to find the best shot possible. Dillon and Desmond have to be better offensively.
I'll start with Dillon real quick and just say, Grizzlies fans, by now, Dillon Brooks, you get a great game one night, and you'll get a game that makes you sigh the next night. We just saw him go 1 for 10 on three-pointers in that game 5. And in game 6, he went 9 of 10, 5 of 6 from three-pointer against the Timberwolves in the closeout game and was the best player arguably on the floor in that third quarter. That's what you get from Dillon Brooks. I'm sure, I don't know if it'll be game 2. I don't know if it'll be game 3, but he'll have a better game. The player I want to focus on, Shawn, is Desmond Bane. Because before the game, Steve Kerr said to us that they have to kind of focus, and I'm paraphrasing, they have to basically focus on who they want to take away. He basically said, you can't take away all their weapons, but there is a choice to be made. Let's prioritize this guy. Let's prioritize that guy. It was clear from the jump, watching how Draymond Green would plant his feet a little bit past the top of the key when he was guarding when he was guarding Ja Morant, at the three-point line. It became pretty obvious, okay, they're giving Ja Morant the three, which is why he took 11 three-pointers in this game. They were giving it to him. And Ja always says, I take what the defense gives me. They sag off, he's going to shoot the ball more. Desmond Bane, though, I feel like the Warriors keyed in. I have to watch it a little bit closer. But Shawn, it felt like that was the player they chose. Because if you look at that last series, why wouldn't they choose him, right? He was the one who kept them afloat in all of those games where, they were coming back. He was the one just kept the Grizzlies treading water all the way through. They limited him in this game like we haven't seen him been limited in a long time. This was his first single-digit scoring effort in this playoffs. This broke his streak. He had 4 consecutive games of 20 or more points. And quite frankly, he wasn't shooting as many shots. So it's not that he was just throwing up shots and missing a lot of them. He just wasn't getting clean looks. He ended up 3 of 10 in this game. So he didn't even get a lot of clean looks because we're used to seeing at least 14, 15 shots from Desmond Bane. I think he's the guy to watch because at the end of the day, he's a factor. How is he a factor? He was still +1 in this game when on the floor. That shows you they're keying in on him. The threat is there. I've seen plenty of times when he dribbled the ball. When he got the ball at the top of the key, sitting courtside there, you would hear the Grizzlies. Hear the Warriors yell, shooter, yell it. Klay Thompson running out to him full speed. They are keying in on him. We'll see, how that develops over the course of the series and how he responds because we saw in game 6, game 5, the Timberwolves started running him off the three-point line and he started getting more of his baskets inside. How will he respond to the way this Golden State defense is attacking him? Because he, as we saw last year, he's as big a part of this offense as anyone.
Absolutely. And the other thing that stood out is that, Ja and Jaren were spectacular. Dylan and Dez struggled. And again, Dylan and Dez are going to have to do their parts to make sure the offense is consistently finding the best shot possible. But another thing that stood out is that the Warriors did enough to keep the Grizzlies from getting advantages where they typically do. The Warriors, and this is the first thing that Ja pointed out, 26 second chance points for the Warriors. 18 fast break points. The Grizzlies and Warriors rebounded just about equal, and they had just about as much paint production. Normal areas where the Grizzlies are able to dominate, where they're usually able to get that extra oomph to win a game like this, their advantages were not there tonight. And I will say that's a bit concerning because unlike the Timberwolves, it's those aspects, those nuances that the Warriors can continue to do that the Timberwolves may not have been able to do, but because of how stacked the Warriors are, experience, pedigree, intelligence, and young depth-wise, they have the ability to stay with the Grizzlies in those areas of advantages. That's why it took the Grizzlies shooting night that it did for the Grizzlies to still have a chance when their normal areas of advantages were not there.
Yeah, and a big reason that their normal area of advantages weren't there is because you talked about Ja and Jaren. But, star players outscoring teams and doing that. Some teams are top heavy. Golden State's top heavy. They basically depend on 4 guys to do the heavy lifting from a scoring perspective. That's not the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies' strength is with their depth. And the reason a lot of those numbers, you talk about the offensive rebound, the second chance points, all of those numbers weren't to the level because a lot of those role players didn't step up. The depth just wasn't there, and you look at Ja and Jaren's number and you say, oh, the Grizzlies are supposed to win. That's not how the Grizzlies have won this season. The Grizzlies haven't won by Kevin Durant and Kyrie scoring 40 points each and doing things like that. The Grizzlies have won by having basically 4 guys on this team average over 16 points. 6 guys average double figures. A point guard coming off the bench who leads the NBA in assists to turnover ratio. A guy coming off the bench at De'Anthony Melton who is top 10 in the NBA in deflections. That's how they've won. Overall, the depth just wasn't there in this game, Shawn. You mentioned Desmond Bane and Dillon Brooks. I mentioned Xavier Tillman. 13 minutes, -10. John Conchar, playing in place of Zaire Williams, only played about 8.5 to 9 minutes, -10, and just that little bit of time. Tyus Jones, great production last series. This game, -9. You didn't get it from those guys while they were in the game. I think Tyus Jones had 2 points, 1 of 4 shooting. Taylor Jenkins went to the 2-point guard lineup that killed the Timberwolves for just about 2.5 minutes, and it wasn't working. This was in the fourth quarter. Went to the lineup, it wasn't working, took Tyus Jones out, went back to his guys. I think he put in De'Anthony Melton at that point. Basically, Shawn, the depth is how they'll win this series if they win it. The depth wasn't there. That's the difference. The Warriors are top heavy. The Warriors are going to depend on 4 guys to do the bulk of their scoring. As we saw in this game, De'Anthony Melton could get hot. We've seen Tyus Jones make big shots. Brandon Clark has been the Grizzlies' best big man during this run. We saw why Jaren Jackson is their best big man overall in this last game. Ja Morant, 31. Ja Morant, like 14 of 31 from the field, getting to the rim, 34 points. You need the depth to win this series for the Grizzlies, and they just didn't have it overall. That's the difference. The Warriors, they're going to be top heavy. Don't try to. They only had 4 players scoring double figures too. That's their style. That's not the Grizzlies' style.
Absolutely, and of course, to your point, the Grizzlies' style is to rely on their options. Well, if you want reliable options for you, I would say check out Built Bar. Built Bar is a wonderful option for your day because it has so many options to choose from when it comes to taste. Have it in the morning for breakfast, have it in the afternoon as a snack. When you go to BuiltBar.com, you even can choose from different products like puffs or bars or what have you. 18 different flavors. And if you use the promo code LOCKED15, you'll get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. When you make Built Bar a part of your day, I feel like it's going to be there to stay. Go to Built.com, put in the promo code LOCKED15, and you get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. On tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, listen, we're going to continue talking about Game 1 and things that need to happen in previewing Game 2, and that includes some changes when it comes to the overall lineup. That and much more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Before we get into a few other positives, though, Damichael, another thing that stood out to me was this. There were a bit more youthful mistakes by the Grizzlies in this game than there typically are. You go back to the second quarter, Jordan Poole, the Grizzlies were up by 13. Jordan Poole made a 3. The Grizzlies were frustrated because of a defensive call not made or what have you. Jaren Jackson made a bad pass. Jordan Poole hits another 3. Keeps the Grizzlies from really starting to pull away. That happened in the second quarter. And then a lot of 50-50 balls went the Warriors' way. But then in the final, I believe 2.5, 3 minutes, 4 of the points the Warriors scored were easy buckets because the Grizzlies just got they got miscommunication in coverage, and Wiggins and Gary Payton Jr. made them pay. Those defensive lapses cannot happen because, as we saw tonight, the Warriors made the Grizzlies pay to the point of winning the game.
Yeah, so many players, had situations where it's like, man, they were one shot, one call away. But you mentioned it, the last couple of minutes, the Grizzlies had chances. They had a 2-point lead, 116, 114, came down to a jump ball. Klay Thompson, hits the 3-pointer to give the Warriors a 1-point lead. Grizzlies go down, don't score. Get another opportunity. Klay Thompson misses 2 free throws. We haven't even harped on this yet. The last shot of the game, a shot Ja Morant hits. But Shawn, Taylor Jenkins liked the look. Ja, he liked the look. And we've seen him make it. We've seen him make it against the Suns, in late December when he made the game-winning basket. We've seen him make it just a couple games ago in Game 5, last series, when Ja Morant walks off the court, telling the fans to call him. We've seen him make the shot. My thing is, and of course, the Warriors said this after the game, they knew it was coming. They knew. When Ja Morant stood in the backcourt by himself, Gary Payton looked over to the Warriors bench. They told him to go up there. Yeah, go face guard him so he can get, when he gets that running head start, you'll be behind him, kind of on the trailer position. Klay Thompson will step over, and he basically left Brandon Clark. If Ja even, if he thought about throwing the lob there, I don't know if he would have been able to connect, but the opportunity was surely there. But overall, I don't want to say it was a predictable call because at the end of the day, Ja liked his look and Taylor Jenkins liked the look. But the Warriors knew it was coming. So that's something you keep in the back of your mind for later on in this series. But yeah, down the stretch, the Warriors kind of were playing with fire. The Grizzlies just, weren't able to burn them.
Absolutely. And you know, we're a Grizzlies podcast, so we're going to talk about from the Grizzlies perspective, but let's give the Warriors credit as well, right? Jordan Poole, he absolutely could not be stopped out on the floor. Kudos to him. Gary Payton Jr. and Andrew Wiggins. So they may not have had a lot of box score impact. They had a lot of outside the box score impact with very, very smart plays. Draymond, even though he had 5 turnovers in the game, he made an impact as well. This Warriors team, their depth did show up, and it did shine. But one of the other things that stood out for the Grizzlies, and I think that this is going to need to continue to be a big thing, De'Anthony Melton absolutely showed up and stood out. And you saw it on both ends. You saw his three-point shooting lead the Grizzlies to a better than expected three-point night. 3 steals, including a breakaway dunk as well. De'Anthony Melton made a true impact on the game. That's going to have to continue if the Grizzlies are going to make this the series that we all want them to make it. Because don't forget, 4th game of the season earlier this year, the Grizzlies came back down from, I believe, 15 or 20 points in the 3rd and 4th quarters. Why? Because they were playing havoc defense led by De'Anthony Melton. De'Anthony Melton was a star in last night's game, Damichael. That has to continue.
De'Anthony Melton, first of all, kudos to Taylor Jenkins. Great call, giving this guy another chance, after he had an off series, against the Timberwolves. Because I said it time and time again, what makes the Grizzlies a good matchup for Golden State is Golden State, they pass the ball as much or more than anyone in the NBA. What comes with a lot of those passes is anticipation. They're not throwing the ball to a guy. They're throwing the ball to a spot where a guy is supposed to be a lot of times. That's next level IQ stuff. That's what the Warriors do a lot of. The great in that is they get a lot of easy open shots. The downside of it is they get a lot of careless turnovers sometimes when teams have players who can jump the passing lanes, or that guy who's supposed to be in the spot doesn't get there. They have moments like those. All getting back to De'Anthony Melton. No player on the Grizzlies is better at the deflections, as we saw, as I mentioned earlier, top 10 in deflections in the NBA. He has the best hands on the team. He could get in those passing lanes. We saw him sky for that. I mean, Shawn, that block on Steph Curry put it pretty up high, and he got his fingertips on it, like almost near the top of the backboard. I mean, this is the De'Anthony Melton series. That's where I'm getting at. Last series, throw it out the window. This series has his scouting report all over. You look at all of his strengths, they're weaknesses for the Warriors. Long arms, defensive standout guy who can anticipate passes, who can get in those passing lanes, who, as you mentioned, 3 steals. I went back. I was looking at that first game where he started against the Warriors when the Grizzlies won that 104-101 game in the regular season. I think he had 4 steals in that game. This is his game. Taylor Jenkins played him. He's going to play a lot more in this series, Shawn.
Absolutely. And, that leads to a bit of a, discussion point leading into tomorrow's show. At the end of the day, I know we talk about Steven Adams making a difference. I know John Conchar and Xavier Tillman played. At the end of the day, this is going to be another narrative about this series. How well can the Grizzlies finalize top 8? Make a difference against the Warriors' top 8. The Warriors' top 8 is more defined than the Grizzlies, but I can tell you this, De'Anthony Melton is clearly one of the top 8 players in this series for the Grizzlies. It showed up tonight. It's going to have to continue to show up. Michael, you got anything else for us before we end this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast?
I'm going to add one more thing, Shawn, because a fan commented something to me, and they basically told me that, hey, everyone is focusing too much on this starting lineup stuff. And like you said, we're going to get more into this on the next episode. We're going to get more into this. But I just want to say before we go, people say, oh, we're harping too much on this starting lineup. Well, my rebuttal to that would be, this was a 1-point Warriors win. That starting lineup decision might, in those early minutes, could very much have been that much of a difference. It matters. It doesn't matter overall when you say, oh, yeah, Brandon Clark is playing big minutes and things like that. Yes, he's eventually going to play more minutes than Xavier Tillman, for example. But that starting decision is important. Let's not just throw it out the window who starts a game just because another guy is going to play more minutes. As we saw, this was a 1-point game. This is the playoffs. This is the regular season. In the playoffs, every single minute from 11:59 left in the first quarter to 1 second in the fourth, they all matter.
Absolutely. And the thing that I'll also end on is this, is that any type of critique of Xavier Tillman being in the starting lineup, you need to separate a couple of truths, right? It's not anything against Xavier Tillman critiquing the fact that he's in the starting lineup. Xavier Tillman is a very, very valuable player, in my opinion, but there's a reason why he's a valuable player off the bench in reserve lineups. Him trying to basically redo what he did in game 2 against the Timberwolves, he wasn't able to replicate it for the rest of the series against the Timberwolves. It's going to be harder to do it against the Warriors, no matter how much of a matchup you may think that he is for Draymond Green. At the end of the day, I understand that it really doesn't matter who starts as long as you make effective changes moving forward. But in a 1-point game, those players being on the court for the minutes that they were and those plus minuses being as low as they were, that's typically not a good thing. So it's nothing against Xavier Tillman to say that going forward, his role should probably be diminished in a series where it's truly shown in a short matter of time he may be more of a liability than an asset. But at the end of the day, Damichael, there's going to be plenty of adjustments to be made. The Grizzlies have made them all year, which should set us up in a good place for Game 2. We'll discuss all that and more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Damichael, I hope you have a good night, sir.
You too, Shawn. We'll talk some more tomorrow.
Have a great one, guys. This has been the latest edition of Locked On Grizzlies podcast.